Good morning, Bruchim Abayim. Welcome everyone. If this is your first time on the channel, please consider looking around at many of my other videos. I have literally thousands of videos of many subjects, as well as recordings of raw recordings of historical events, many things in the Jewish world, all throughout this channel. So it's a great channel to check out, and thank you for watching. I like to every now and then answer these questions from Quora.com. And it's easier for me as I'm driving to work to just answer in the car. So the question here is, was the relationship between Yiddish and Hebrew, and how did Yiddish originate? The best answer I can give is that the relationship between Yiddish and Hebrew could be compared to the relationship between English and Latin. Now, English is a Germanic language, as Yiddish is. Latin is, of course, basically the mother of all the Romance languages. But the English that we use today is written in the Latin alphabet, more or less. And similarly, Yiddish basically started as German written in the Hebrew alphabet. Now, just like there are many words that are of Latin origin in English, so too there are many Hebrew words in Yiddish. Particularly if they are religious words, they generally would not be translated or using a German word, but rather a Yiddish word. The reason for this can be found if we study the linguistics of Orthodox Jews today who speak English. Yet when they're speaking English, they're not using words like Sabbath and Pentateuch and phylacteries, but rather they're using Shabbos or Shabbat and Chumash or Torah and Tefillin. And in the same way in Yiddish, the days of the week are generally the same as they are in German. Sonntag, Montag, Dienstag, Mittwoch, Donnerstag, Freitag. Most of those names being originated in Norse mythology for the most part, except for Mittwoch, which is different than in English we say Wednesday, which is the Norse, Odin's day. And yet, Saturday is not called Saturday; it's called Shabbos in Yiddish. There are some secular Yiddishists who will respell Shabbos instead of spelling it as traditionally in traditional Yiddish. You just spell it in Hebrew, because the rules of spelling in Yiddish are different than the rules of spelling in Hebrew. Just like, again, we have many different languages that use the Latin alphabet, and yet the rules of using those letters differ in the various languages. And so you have this anomaly of the secular Yiddishists who would spell Shabbos Shin Aleph Beis Ayin Samech instead of the traditional Hebrew way Shin Beis Sof. Might go over the heads of some of the people watching. So today, the more standard Yiddish, though, has become the traditional Yiddish. And so on Duolingo, for example, people wanting to learn Yiddish, they're going to get the Yiddish that's spoken today, which is a very traditional Yiddish that has a lot of Hebrew words in it. And so that's the reason why I'm answering this question of the relationship between Yiddish and Hebrew, is, as mentioned, Hebrew words will generally be used for anything that's in a religious context in Yiddish, as is spoken. And actually the spoken Yiddish today has much less Yiddish and a lot more of whatever language one speaks, or is the language of the land where one is. And so the spoken Yiddish that you'll hear in Brooklyn or in upstate New York, where you have enclaves of people for whom Yiddish is the main language that they speak, there will be a lot more English words used in spoken Yiddish. And so, for example, me as a youth being interested in the language of Yiddish learned a lot from books on Yiddish. And so I remember my children who attend schools where they speak only Yiddish, and I use the word mantel for a coat, and they said, "Man sucht nicht a mantel, man sucht a coat." They just call it a coat instead of a mantel. Interestingly, though, the word mantel, a mentala, still is used for the cover for a Torah scroll, for a Sefer Torah. And so, in certain religious contexts, we still have Yiddish words as opposed to Hebrew words. So that is basically the relationship between Yiddish and Hebrew and how did Yiddish originate. Once again, the relationship between Yiddish and Hebrew is essentially the relationship between Latin and English, that it originated as German being written in Hebrew letters. As other languages, you have the Judeo-Aramaic that's written in Hebrew letters. You have Ladino, which is Spanish written in Hebrew letters. But because these communities were isolated, they developed into their own dialects that were different than their original languages. And so, although Yiddish began as German written in Hebrew letters, it no longer is identical to German, even beyond the Hebrew words. So I remember one of my rabbis, Rabbi Blitsky, of blessed memory, he said he remembered, some students who thought, well, in college I have to take so many courses to fill up my course load. I already know Yiddish, I'll take German, because it should be easy enough because I know Yiddish. And it really is not as easy, to compare. There are videos you can find online of German speakers and Yiddish speakers seeing how much they understand from each other. And it's probably about 80%, and the accents are very, very different. It's more different even than, let us say, the difference between English spoken in America and English spoken in Australia. Although, again, you have those various dialects that develop all over the world of English and of other languages as well. But it's not really fair to call Yiddish a dialect of German as much as it's somewhat more of a pidgin language that mixes not only German and Hebrew, but also words from other languages reflecting the countries that the Yiddish speakers are in. So you'll have a lot of Slavic words, some Russian words, sometimes maybe Polish words or Hungarian words that entered into Yiddish. Not really so many Hungarian words. The interesting thing is that the Hungarian-speaking Jews generally were fluent in both Hungarian and Yiddish, and many spoke Hungarian. My grandfather, his parents spoke both Yiddish and Hungarian, but he, born in America, my grandfather grew up speaking Hungarian because his parents did not really speak Yiddish around him. Others I know, one rabbi who I know is about the age of my parents said that he remembers his parents, they grew up speaking Yiddish and English in the home, and his parents, who were Holocaust survivors from Poland, would speak Polish when they didn't want the children to understand, as opposed to many American Jews who were not raised speaking Yiddish, and when the parents wanted to say something that the kids could not understand, the parents would speak Yiddish. So the way Yiddish, though, again, has evolved through the years, now includes, as we said, not only many Hebrew and Aramaic terms, and particularly if we're talking about different types of Yiddish. A Yiddish that's used in a Talmud lecture in Yiddish will have a lot more Hebrew and Aramaic than Yiddish. Basically just use Yiddish in place of English, for lack of a better term. It's much more rare, though, in this day and age, outside of the Hasidic world, to have Talmudic lectures in Yiddish, as it was, until not too long ago. Actually, Yeshiva University, the modern Orthodox school, Yeshiva and University, the Talmud lectures were still in Yiddish until maybe the 1960s. And so we see, how, and today, of course, the Talmudic lectures in Yeshiva University are in English, but the average English speaker, if he would listen to the Talmudic lecture, which you can find many of them on yutorah.org, if you want to listen to them, probably would not understand a lot of the words, because it's assumed that someone who is listening to the lecture understands the Hebrew and Aramaic words that are being used. And so, for this reason, we have these various points. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment, and we'll see you later. And please check out some of our other videos. Alright, how do I turn this thing off? This one?